Great. As folks are getting in, I'd like to make a few announcements. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the conference day one, the Public Funders Forum. We're about to jump into the webinar really quickly here because we've got a lot to get through, but just a few announcements. Letting folks know that this session is being recorded, so we'll send it out afterwards, as well as any slides that are presented today. You can have access to them. If you have questions during the presentation today, please go ahead and place them in the Q&A. Do not place them in the chat box. They will get lost in the chat box. So the Q&A box is your friend. Our moderator, Mark, today will be checking them out throughout the presentation, as well as our panelists will be answering questions while they can. And there will also be a Q&A session at the end. So with that, I'm going to get off camera and I'm going to pass it over to Mark Stivers to start us off. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are live from San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Sacramento, coming to you. And I'm Mark Stivers with the California Housing Partnership, our Director of Advocacy. And we all know that the affordable housing developers are very interested in finding the money for their next development. And so we have gathered today here, basically the federal, state, and local partners for the LA area who do provide those resources. And what we've asked them to do to spend about 10 minutes each talking about particularly, what's new in their programs and what policy changes are new or pending, and especially those that are likely to affect a project's competitiveness. And then sort of what is the amount of funds that are available this year for you all to go after. So we have quite the distinguished guests today. I will be monitoring chat at the end. I may have a few questions, but I think we're going to mostly rely on you all for the questions you pose in the Q&A, as Ariana mentioned. So without further ado, I'm going to, first of all, turn it over to Matt Nash from HUD, and I'm going to ask him to introduce himself here. But then I've also asked each of the panelists just to give you a little bit more personal context to name what was their favorite school activity when they were in high school. So a little bit personal, and then we can jump into business. So Matt, please jump ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it, and really happy to be here with all of you today. Thanks again for the opportunity to share information. Let's see. Favorite activity in high school? God, there were a lot of them. Probably snowboarding. I was a big snowboarder in high school, and enjoyed that well into my late 20s. Had a few injuries, and then switched to back to skiing, and don't take it quite as intensely as I once did. But yeah, I would say snowboarding.
All right. Well, that's a good idea. So now we get to enjoy you at HUD rather than seeing you in the Olympics, but that probably worked out well for affordable housing. So thank you.
There you go. Well, I do have a deck to share. I'm not going to put it up on the screen in the interest of time, but I will make it available for folks to have access to at the end of the presentation. The deck actually has a lot of information. It's really focused on the view from HUD, what's new, what's happening at HUD, what's the status of certain things, and certainly, as Mark said, with a focus on funding availability and things that may be of interest to you as you're putting your deals together. Very quickly, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Multifamily West organization, just how we're set up and who you typically will interact with. Talk a little bit about the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, or GRRP, and benchmarking, a new management fee memo that we recently issued, multifamily funding for seniors and persons with disabilities, multifamily funding for service coordinators, RAD for PRAC, Multifamily West FHA, and other potential funding sources, in particular for preservation transactions. The new Federal Flood Risk Management Standard, FFRMS, subsidy contract funding and preserving project-based subsidy, leveraging tenant-based vouchers, and then finally working with HUD when you're recapitalizing existing HUD portfolio properties, or heavy preservation transactions, as we like to call them. Again, not going to get through all of these topics. but we'll make the slides available, and we'll be happy to follow up with folks if they have questions after you've had a chance to review the slides we don't get to. So very quickly, in terms of the organization, the areas in which you will likely interface with the Multifamily West organization, and that's administration of all multifamily programs at HUD for the 14 Western states. So Colorado, roughly Colorado, north, south, and everything west out to Guam. There's two main divisions, production and asset management. Production handles all of our FHA financing programs. The director of the production division is Shannon Bergman. And then asset management is the other group that you will work with most frequently. And we have three division directors there. Eileen Herty is out of our Denver office, and she handles the portfolio servicing for federal regions 8 and 10. Rob Bowden is in our San Francisco office, and he handles the servicing activities for Federal Region 9. That's California, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii. And then Julie Carter is the third asset management division director, and her group handles all of our funding for the entire region, RAD transactions, PRACs, APB transfers, opt-outs, grants, and a variety of other things. So again, very quick overview of sort of who you will interface with and what divisions cover what. As you guys know, I'm sure some of you know, some of you may not, one of HUD's recent signature grant and loan programs is the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, also known as GRRP. And it's really designed to provide a funding source, a supplemental funding source for folks to add green and resilient features to their properties. It's been a very successful program. We just closed the final round of funding and made announcements. To date, we've issued about 1.2 billion in commitments in the GRP program. There's three different cohorts: comprehensive, leading age, and elements. The comprehensive is about 500 million of that 1.2 billion. And there is a little bit of money left and a few additional, awards that will be made. For the West region, we account for about 110 million of that 1.2 billion. Again, that's spread out over the 14 Western states. About 22 or so total awards. Energy benchmarking, for those of you that don't know, there are a number of states: California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and then some jurisdictions within other states in the Western region that actually are now requiring or will be requiring energy benchmarking for commercial and multifamily buildings. HUD has a program that actually does all of that benchmarking for you for free. All you need to do is send an email to our benchmarking inbox, and our contractor will be in touch with you to figure out how to move forward for your property if you are interested. It's a good deal. And again, we try and make it as easy for you as possible. Again, this information is in the slide deck and next steps and how to contact us, but certainly something to consider if benchmarking is something you'd like to do at your property. I wanted to quickly mention our 2024 management agent fee memo. And Mark, I know we're on a time limit here, so I am watching the clock, but let me know as I have about a minute or so to wrap up, so I don't drone on and on too much. The management fee memo we put together actually in response to the industry. So many of you said, hey, HUD, your management fee just is not in line with what's realistic in the market and frankly what we need to operate our properties. So we, with your input, made some changes to that management fee policy and issued a new memo. We've increased allowable fees an average of about 14% across the board. It's different in each state. We've also added a couple new what we call add-on fees. So there's a base fee, and then there's a variety of categories that you can increase the base fee by. It could be that you have a difficult tenant population. It could be that your property is subsidized. It could be any number of things. So we've tried to be flexible there and to deliver an increase, which we've had, which we've done. And I wanted to make sure that you all are aware of that. Again, the details as well as the memo will be included in the presentation. Moving on to some of the other funding sources, multifamily recently closed NOFOs for seniors and persons with disabilities. That's the 202 and 811 programs, the capital advance programs. About 176 million for the 202, 811 capital advance, a little over 100 million for the 811 disabled capital advance, and then another just over 100 million for the 811 associated rental assistance. We are in the process of reviewing and scoring those NOFOs and hope to have awards made later this year. Similarly, multifamily closed a NOFO for the Service Coordinator Grant Program at the middle of March of this year. The NOFO is going to award up to about 40 million. We hope to make about 160 awards. The Service Coordinator Program is primarily intended to supplement salaries and fringe benefits and quality assurance, training, supplies, startup costs, etc., for your service coordinator programs. Folks that are eligible are 202 direct loans and project-based Section 8, 221D3s with below market rate interest. Really good program. If it's not something you've looked at, keep a lookout for the next NOFO. And if you did apply, you should be hearing from HUD, in the next couple of months when we finalize scoring and release the information. I'm not going to go. I'm going through my deck here, but I'm not going to go through the 202 pracs for RAD, other than to say there's a lot of information in this deck. If you don't know about potentially utilizing RAD for prac, you should look at it. It's a way to transfer your annual prac contract to a 20-year project-based rental assistance contract, which allows you to more easily securitize or secure debt and equity and utilize that funding stream long-term to help revitalize and recapitalize your property.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Before we move on, there are two questions. I think they're fairly quick. Why don't we take them right now? But one question was, does the GRRP program, or has the GRRP program issued its final awards, or is this program continuing?
It has. We've gone through the final NOFO round, and there are a few properties that dropped out for various reasons. And so there's essentially a waiting list, and we're going through that waiting list, and we'll make a few more awards. But yes, for all intents and purposes, that billion that was made available for GRP is spent. We have put in a request for additional funding in our next budget for fiscal year 26. We will see what happens with the elections and the approval process for HUD's budget. But we're hopeful that given the success of this program and the need, and that we have the infrastructure set up and we're ready to continue to deliver, that we will get additional funding.
So fingers crossed for another round. And then on the management fee, there was a question: is there a cap on the add-ons to the management fees?
There is a cap to the add-on fees. So you only have a certain amount for each add-on, and you can't exceed that amount. So yes, there is a cap.
But they are cumulative. There's not like some, there's 5 available and you can only get 2 or something like that.
No, you can receive every add-on that applies to your property up to the maximum amount of that particular add-on.
Got it. All right. Well, with that, we're going to come back to you, Matt, again in the question and answers when we get back to the end. But I'm going to turn it now to Zach Olmsted, who's Deputy Director for the California's Department of Housing and Community Development. And welcome, Zach. It's nice to see you. And again, just if you don't mind telling us something that your favorite activity from high school, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Hi, everybody. I did do a number of things, but when you asked the question, Mark, my memory went to like the friendships formed, and those are mostly formed just my closest friends over the beginnings, but not finishing of many like Risk, the games of the board game Risk, believe it or not, like sitting in the hot summer nights of Sacramento and starting it and then moving on to other things or going out or something like that. So thought I'd go a little.
All right, so Zach is still trying to take over the world. He's almost there at HCD.
There we go. There we go. And that is a good segue to HCD, which is seeking to do that. Yeah. So I do want to talk a little bit about, I think it's helpful to ground about like HCD's overall kind of approach in portfolio. Clearly, a lot of emphasis from the governor, from the administration, certainly from the legislature on the topics of affordable housing writ large, and certainly homelessness. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of what I would say are like kind of the multiple prongs of that commitment and how we get there. Strengthening housing laws, cutting through red tape at the local levels to speed up development, the unprecedented amounts of funding, but then the accountability to those laws and to that funding. And I was really kind of hoping to start with some optimism about how we know what we are doing is working. You would not believe that probably, if you were talking to your friends at a dinner party, but here's how we know it's working. We know from all the data we have over the last many years that development timelines continue to decrease for all projects in the residential development pipeline. In fact, they've basically been cut in half. So we attribute these. So in 2018, the average development timeline was 145 days. In 2023, it was 63 days. So why did this happen, right? We've enacted a number of laws, SB 35, SB 330. We have a housing accountability unit, a number of other laws, far too many, scores and scores, maybe even hundreds by now of laws that are all seeking to kind of get at that issue. We have an accountability and enforcement unit that is unlocked, depending upon how you want to characterize it, over 23,000 housing units, many of those that are affordable units, and that number continues to grow as we kind of enforce those laws. The other thing is the multifamily housing activity, which we are obviously very focused on here at HCD. It remained high in 2023. So it was over 308,000 units in that pipeline, which is above that previous 5-year average. That was our 5-year average. This is above, by tens of thousands above our previous 5-year average. So that continues to grow with each successive year. In particular, ADU production is a big driver of that. It's almost 28,000 permits a year for that. Before we did all those ADU laws, right, we were in the hundreds of permits per year, right? And even in the early years of that, in like 2018 or so, it was a couple thousand. Right now, we're in the tens of thousands per year, right? So how do we know it's working? We continue to see increases there. The share of development that is affordable to lower income Californians also significantly continues to grow. So back in 2018, you know, kind of before this administration, before some of our big expansions in the law and in investment, we saw essentially lower income units account for 9% of our total permitted units, and only 7% of those total units completed. In 2023, that's 19% of all permitted units are lower income units, and 16% of those are completed. So, and there's various other pieces of data. I really do encourage folks. We have a lot of open data on our website from our annual progress report data. It's really nice to search through. You can validate and verify all of that. But bottom line is we're seeing huge jumps. In fact, even from 22 to 23, 23 is the last year we have full data for, of course, we saw a 61% increase in lower income unit production. Final piece of data, and then I promise you I will get into it. In 2018, the state, and we're far below where we want to be, of course, but in 2018, the state completed, meaning finished and constructed 70,000 housing units. Every year since then, those numbers have risen. It was 112,000 last year, right? So we are on the right trajectory. The things we are doing are working. A lot more needs to be done, of course. So it's not just the policies, it's the resources, right? We have a huge housing gap. Our department has identified 2.5 million homes needed. 1 million of those need to be affordable by 2030. That's in the statewide housing plan. This year, getting to the funding piece, right? This year, we have a NOFA calendar. It's out there all the time. We have about 4.8 billion with a B in resources available through our myriad programs. I'll just focus probably on some of the bigger ones, but I do encourage folks to go look at that. There's a number of federal sources. There's a number of sources related to disaster. There's a number of kind of targeted sources, certainly around expanded emphasis on homelessness. And so I want to just kind of like take a moment of personal privilege. Like for those of us that have been working on this for a long time, which I know all of us on the panel and many of you guys have been, I mean, that we were thrilled 10 years ago when it would be hundreds of millions available for each city, right? We're talking 4.8 billion just this fiscal year. That's up from the previous 2 fiscal years where we had a couple billion each. So there's still a lot of resources to deploy. And we, of course, are pairing those investments with kind of our hopefully improved processes and enforcement and laws, right? It's really critical, right, to deploy those resources to work with all of our partners, right? Local governments, developers, and the like. One of the ways, the major things, which I'll focus a little bit on just because it's very timely, is our efforts to consolidate where possible some of those resources. So we have a super NOFA, both for our multifamily development, but we also have one for homeownership, where we were able to cobble together several of the programs that work in those spaces. We have kind of unified sets of guidelines now, of course, for those super NOFAs, trying to continue to streamline that application process and align that scoring with CDLAC and TCAC programs, right? People submit their applications online. We are continuing to work to streamline our standard agreement process, especially as things that get more complicated. If you do go look at our NOFA calendar, the type is very, very small, and you have to zoom in because it's too long and too many programs to list. We obviously have a lot of projects that utilize a lot of different funding sources, so sometimes that can be complicated, but we're trying to consolidate that where it makes sense. In this past several months and year, we have established now a single point of contact for any HCD awardee, so you will only be communicating with one person, even if you have many awards. We saw too often as people were utilizing many of our programs with the potential for conflicting information. I hope that is working. I'd really love feedback on if you were hearing from your single point of contact. If you are an awardee, they are your point of contact to answer any questions. They will work internally to deal with all that mess about getting the answers from our attorneys and all that sort of stuff, but you should only be hearing from them. And their job, as I remind our staff all the time, these are our projects too. We want to get them done and completed as quickly as possible. And their jobs are to help make sure that happens. I will say we're very oversubscribed all the time for our programs, right? The Super NOFA, especially, you know, I think we got like over 3 billion in requests for the first round we had, right? And so we've done a second round and we're heading into our third round of this. We had to skip a year essentially last year because of the budget uncertainty. We've made a lot of changes between the first and second rounds. I think you'll see fewer changes coming between the second and third rounds, and we should have actually, and I wish it was out for the time of this because then I could celebrate, but I think tomorrow we will be releasing our draft guidelines for the Super NOFA for comment. So you'll see a couple things in there, and hopefully it was received. Earlier this week, we announced some changes related to how we handle capitalized operating subsidy reserves and support services caps. It certainly will incorporate those changes. That's more of an omnibus change to our programs based on legislation that has occurred. But we have a number of things that you'll see in there. Alignment with CIDLAC and TCAC on developer fees, for example, moving forward in our programs. Hopefully changes that improve your experience, including topics of like threshold disqualifications, streamlining underwriting, places we've gotten questions in the past from the last round. And then our applications will, of course, be in turn updated as well. So that will be out there for feedback. We'll obviously be looking to finalize those guidelines with a NOFA announcement in the spring, the first quarter probably of 2025. We expect about 420 million is available within that program, within our multifamily supernova. And I should say, even though we're focused on that right now, we also will have a homeownership supernova out before the end of this year, which consolidates some of our resources on the homeownership side. So, while your feedback, we know nothing's perfect. We're trying to constantly innovate, right, and meet the needs with you all, our partners. All of that I talked about only happens with the partnership of people on the ground, right, delivering those projects, local governments, and the like. I'll just take a couple more minutes. I don't know how I'm a time mark, but
yeah, you have about 1 or 2 minutes, and I have one question for you when you're ready.
Great. I'll just need 1 more minute. Because I want to talk about some of the stuff we're doing. Obviously, we have a big emphasis as a department and as administration on Proposition 1. $2 billion plus, that's all going to be out probably next month with a NOFA. Applications kind of trailing a couple months after that. That's a big point of emphasis and expansion on our home key work and to deliver on Proposition 1, which was voters passed earlier this year. Happy to answer questions on that, but I don't want to take up too much of our time. I do want to end here, right? Accountability for us is not just about enforcing laws to local government. The value that we're trying to make throughout this department and certainly in the state is to maximize public investment and establish that credibility with the public, right? So that goes with our investments. I tell our staff accountability flows both ways, right? It means that HCD as a department has to have a real urgency about getting the projects we award built, right? Figuring out how we can help projects fill their financing gaps, making them stewards, delivering on the timelines that are needed with standard agreements. That is a big priority internally here for our department. Especially because those projects we award have been vetted, right, to meet state policy objectives and priorities. And so it's our job to get those to completion. So like the single point of contact I mentioned is just one of those like kind of reforms, so to speak, to have more transparency in how we get there. The other parts that we emphasize and have done over the last couple of years are disencumbering awards that just aren't progressing to a reasonable path to completion, right? It's like we're stewards of state funds. The promise is to deliver those outcomes, right, in the way of housing completion. And so, we're not getting that public benefit that was promised. So we have a disencumbrance policy, which I know we often get a lot of questions on. We also have a negative points policy, right, to ensure that the state is a responsible steward of those funds and that who we're awarding delivers on those funds, meets all the reporting obligations, is delivering on that public promise and that public-private partnership. So I will just say, like, we're constantly looking to hold ourselves accountable as well as hold our partners accountable. And I just want that to be a message that delivers from here. And that's why we're doing some of the things that you see. So we continue to try to streamline. We're working on with some of our state partners here. How do we do uniform funding applications? How can we make easier, right, this complex housing finance system that has multiple steps in the process? How do we jointly monitor our projects? How do we even provide more innovative financing options, right? So anyways, I'll stop. I know I got to stop here, Mark, but like I think another big reminder, which I'll leave us at, is we have still momentum and interest from the governor, the legislature, and the public to address these issues. But it's not lost on me or our department that we can't expect this attention to last forever. So we are trying to act with as much urgency as possible to build on that momentum we have and keep it going for as long as we can, so we can get not only these policies enacted, enforced, but the housing built, continued investments flowing, and of course, partners like you guys are critical to that and crucial to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Zach. That's you guys have been busy for sure. So there's one question I'll take now. I'll come back to some of the others later, but I think I noticed that there was a question about the future funding for the local housing trust fund matching grant program. I just looked at your NOFA calendar myself, and I think the application period for that just closed in September. At this time, are you aware of any future funding? It looks like that is the last of bond funding, and there may not be any other funding identified at this time. Is that?
Yeah, our notebook calendar itself actually accounts for pretty much all the funding we have remaining at this point. That's not to say we can't get more, but that is the last remaining funding we have for the program.
Good. So it depends on a bond or the next budget. All right. All right. Well, we'll come back to Zach as well. I know there's some other questions there, but I'm going to turn to Marina Wyatt, who wears two hats. She is both the executive director of the Tax Credit Allocation Committee and the acting director of the Debt Limit Allocation Committee. So for some time, we've had one person serving in both roles, and Marina is doing so very ably. And Marina, why don't you start us off again? Reminder what you like to do in high school, and then tell us about the tax credit program, which everyone is always so interested in.
Sure. So like everyone here, I did participate in many things in high school. I'm still paying for my time at student council because I still am responsible for high school reunions. But probably the highlight is that I was in an advanced choir for many years, but in particular with that choir, we traveled to France and Japan my senior year. And so that's probably one of the biggest highlights of high school for me. I'm gonna share my screen. And hopefully this works. Is this correct, or do I need to swap it, Mark?
Why don't you go ahead, and you've still got the notes version up if you can move
Okay.
it to the full screen one. There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So again, excited to be here, and I'll see folks tomorrow at the actual at the in-person portion of SCANF conference. As Mark said, I oversee both CIDLAC and TCAC. CIDLAC authorized, we had over $5 billion in bond allocation available for the qualified residential housing program. So a big bar, we had about 5.4 billion total. So continue to emphasize affordable housing within CIDLAC. And then, you know, TCAC awards federal and state tax credits for affordable housing projects. We had a really competitive year. I think more competitive than we had anticipated, more competitive than I think the development community anticipated. And part of it, we're still looking at sort of exactly why. I think part of it in particular was the HCD projects are now eligible to compete in the 9%, which changes the dynamics a little bit. So you'll see in round one, we had 69 applications that were received and 27 approved, but 103 applications in round two for 9% projects, and 25 of those received allocation. What this meant was we have awarded 52 projects total. You can see the breakdown of the number of units and type of project on your screen. I think what was this is in some ways fairly typical for the 9% program. What was particularly surprising for us was the vast demand for 4% and bond allocation this year. 161 applications in round one, 193 applications in round two. I think part of this was because this year we split the state credits between the two rounds. So in previous years, when state credits are out, those projects don't come in, projects that need state credits don't come in subsequent rounds. But this year, everyone kept coming back. We are anticipating, so here you'll see in round one, we approved 61 projects. Round two, I think it's just notable to, again, highlight that we had 7.6 billion in bond requests, but only 2.7 billion was available. And so we're expecting about 78 projects to be able to move forward in December. But what's really notable here compared to last year is that we didn't even get to fund all of the projects, that new construction projects that did not request state credits. So we have 36 projects don't need state credits that are not going to be able to move forward this year. Again, here's sort of just a general summary of the sheer volume that our staff dealt with this year in the program. But what I want to talk a little bit about is looking forward. So this year we already had some pretty major regulation changes, both in the TCAC and CIDLAC side. We solicited feedback for regulation changes in September, and we should be have draft regulations out in the next week or two, 2 weeks. But what I really wanted to highlight is some of the big changes that we saw this year and what we're going to be seeing likely coming out. So in April, Zach kind of alluded to our developer fee increase, but we did include an increase to the developer fee on both the 9% and 4% programs. But alongside that, we also instituted an annual rent cap for affordable housing for new tax credit projects. At the same time, we were trying to capture as best as we could some of the existing portfolio. And so we did include that the rent cap would apply for ownership transfers as well. But along came AB 846, which was signed by the governor a couple weeks ago. And that bill will be authorizing and sort of directing TCAC to apply the rent cap policy to the entire LIHTC portfolio. So we will be implementing AB 846 largely as part of this reg package that will be coming out this month. What we are planning to do is to essentially just apply what is currently in the regs more broadly and with a sort of a start date of January 1st. Alongside that, we are planning to include a draft of the rent cap waiver policy to get folks' input on that as well. There's also in the regs, I think, going to be a pretty some attention to just general cleanup of definitions and reorganizing in general some of the components of the regs that deal with tenant related issues, so that they're kind of isolated in one section. Our staff has been dealing with a significant number of complaints from the tenant community. And so we're really trying to make sure that folks understand the regulations and the rules of the program. A lot of the things that come in from the public, I think sometimes is a result of confusion about the program and what the program is providing. So we're really looking forward. It's probably going to take some time, but we're really looking at trying to create more clarity and transparency, both through fact sheets and guidance on the website, but also in the regs to make sure that the rules of the program are well understood by everyone. Let's see, on the CIDLAC side, there's a couple items that we're planning to address. The BIPOC pool continues to sort of be a challenging space to ensure that folks that are eligible are the ones applying and competing. And so we are working also in the regs to make sure that we establish a pre-qualification process so the projects that want to compete as BIPOC projects sort of get certified ahead of time before the round that they can compete, to avoid some of the challenges we've been having during the rounds. And we're also looking at establishing a more clear negative points policy at CIDLAC. Now that CIDLAC is as competitive as the 9% program, I think we'd like to make sure that sort of a similar negative points policy is in play. As far as the proposed schedule, as many people know, we had 2 rounds of 4% and 2 rounds of 9% this year. And next year, we are planning to probably return back to 3 4% rounds. And we're talking about having the first round be early in the year and be for projects that are not requesting state credits, so that we can kind of move a lot of the projects that are already ready out early in the year. And additionally, there was a bill in the legislature this year dealing with, again, veteran issues, to try to clarify the VASH voucher, and we got federal guidance that VASH vouchers, as well as other sort of support services for vets, don't count as income. We're at TCAP working on implementing that and should be getting guidance out for that in the next couple of weeks as well. And then lastly, we're continue to work with HCD and our research partners on the opportunity maps, and those will be coming out in the next couple weeks to probably alongside the proposed regulations. I am gonna stop there.
Thank you. And Marina, I'm going to take one question here from the Q&A just for now. You touched on the rounds, and you just mentioned 3-4% rounds are likely next year. The question from the audience was also just, do you have any information on state credits? Will they be made available over multiple rounds? Sounds like not in the first round of 3, but it would be over the second and third, or just the second, etc.
I'm not sure yet. Right now, we're kind of looking at analyzing the results from this year. This year, we did it different than previous years. I'm not sure it worked exactly how we wanted. There are some areas of the state, or in the geographic competition, there are regions that didn't receive any SIDLAC allocation at all this year because all of the projects there were asking for state credits. Which I think does raise some just general issues about kind of how do we make sure that the state credits are kind of being allocated fairly, and that every area of the state has a chance to have access to them. So we're working on that. Again, welcome feedback. I'm really hoping that we get the regs in place in December so people can plan for 2025 earlier than in the past. I'm hoping that the schedule is all done in December as well, and that we have a general sense of what the community can expect in 2025 by the end of this year.
All right, thank you very much, and we will look forward to those possible reg changes. All right, we're going to skip over here now to Lynn Catano from the County of LA, and welcome, Lynn, and always nice to have you with us here. And maybe you can tell us what you did in high school, and then tell us what you're doing now.
Right. Thanks, Mark. So Lynn Catano, I'm Director of Housing Investment and Finance here at the LA County Development Authority. And I wasn't sure how I wanted to be portrayed from my high school days, whether it was the math science club or the varsity softball team. But actually, my fondest memories were being in this little sorority in our high school. And all the girlfriends that I met in high school, I would say a good majority of us still get together on a regular basis. I mean, they've been my best friends ever since, I'm going to have to say, when I was 6 years old. So I'm very fortunate to have those memories. Anyway, to get into information that is probably more interesting for those in LA County. I know this is a broader space than just LA County. But relative to LA County, I have some good news. Is we are anticipating releasing a NOFA 31, coming up in November. We are returning to affordable housing trust funds in this NOFA. Our previous 2 NOFAs were specific funding sources, such as the Home ARP and No Place Like Home. So this round will be affordable housing trust funds, and it will also include some project-based vouchers that are eligible for use in our participating jurisdictions and in jurisdictions that have PBVs but can demonstrate they've reached their cap. So we will have those available. And we hope the awards will be issued in time for the spring tax credit and HDC applications. Now, of course, Marina said they're trying to have something early in 2025, and we don't know exactly when. I can't guarantee what that might be, so hopefully we'll be able to achieve that also. In addition to our NOFA, we do have some upcoming opportunities with requests for proposals on county surplus land. So this is something that we're really excited about. We've got two sites, two larger sites, definitely. One is going to be on the Metro State Hospital site, and that's a permanent supportive housing project that will be leveraging No Place Like Home funds. The other will be what we call Rancho Los Amigos South Campus, and that's also going to be a permanent supportive housing projects. Of course, both these projects have room for mixed income populations, but keep a lookout for those RFPs either by the end of the year or early 2025. We also have a smaller RFP going out, and this is for a smaller lot in the East LA area. So the county will be actively involved in Home Key Plus, right? The funds will be managed by our Department of Mental Health, but we haven't determined which county agency will be taking the lead on that. In the past, we've had the CEO, Homeless Initiative, has taken the lead on Home Key 1, 2, and 3 with assistance from the LACDA. But with the inclusion of the Prop 1 funds and DMH's involvement, we've taken a step back right now to look at what agency would be the best suited for that. So just a little bit of an opportunity to show how busy we've been. I know everybody's extremely busy. Everyone's capacity is probably maxed out. We're all looking for staff due to competition with a lot of affordable housing projects. So keep that in mind. People are looking for a government position with an innovative, very supportive group. LACDA is a great place to work, and we are consistently looking for staff. But our current NOFA pipeline, for the past 5 years, we've had 77 projects that received certificates of occupancy for a total of over 5,000 units. Currently in our pipeline, we have 40 projects in construction, representing 2,864 units. We have 33 projects in pre-development, representing another 2,789 units. And we have 33 projects currently pending perm conversion. So extremely busy, a lot going on here. Total funding committed to the projects in our pipeline is over $500 million. So in 2024 alone, we've had 7 project closings, 5 groundbreakings, and 19 grand openings for a total of 1,433 units. And in 2025, we're expecting the completion of 20 NOFA projects for another 1,729 units. So when people doubt that we're not making a dent in homelessness in LA, I think those numbers do demonstrate how much we're doing here and how much money we are dedicating to that effort. So yeah, I'm just very excited with the activity we have going on. We're very fortunate to have a funding stream available. And please look forward to our upcoming NOFA and, looking forward to any questions you may have. So thanks, Mark.
All right, thanks, Lynn. And then representing nothing less than the biggest city in the state of California. Daniel, do you want to take it over for us? Daniel?
I love all that pressure. Hi, my name is Daniel Nguyen, Assistant General Manager of the Housing Development Bureau at LHD. Happy to be invited amongst all our esteemed members. In terms of high school, I think I was definitely not a jock, but loved basketball, and I loved, Magic the Gathering and video games. So that was me in high school. All right, so I'm going to do a couple of things. I will just talk a little bit more about where our current pipeline is, and then also the available funds. So I would say for the city of LA, we currently in our pipeline of projects that are in pre-development and in construction, that's 75 projects amounting a little bit over 6,100 units. Of the 75 projects, 26 of those projects are in pre-development, meaning they're still trying to secure their further financing. And then we also have 49 projects that are currently in construction. So it's pretty busy for us. I love how Lynn was kind of describing the amount of work that is in front of us. The department tries to attend all of the groundbreakings and grand openings, which are happening probably once every other week or so. Specifically for the 26 projects that are in pre-development, we have 13 that are kind of stranded. Construction budgets have grown, or rather, in terms of the underwriting, some of them were 4% bond deals with applying for state credits. But generally, we have a very healthy pipeline. This past year, we've been focused on, in terms of using our funding sources, tied to two main concerns: projects that are in construction that somehow through COVID have seen huge construction gaps grow, as well as the aging portfolio in the city of LA. So more kind of preservation related issues. And we rolled out our Fast Track Solutions program 1.0, which was a little bit close to, we awarded $20 million, supporting 670 units that had a number of challenges. We also issued Fast Track Solutions Program 2.0, which is close to $25 million, supporting 732 units. In addition, we also issued another NOFA, which is the ULA Accelerator Plus, which was a little bit close to $55 million. So it hasn't been easy in terms of helping to address the construction gaps. And we think all of the development partners are leaning in. Equity investors have decided to accelerate their pay-in schedule. Construction lenders have, for I guess their good clients, have waived and reduced extension fees. Again, construction loan interests have doubled. If those developers did not secure a swap product or to fix the rate, they were really faced with construction loan interest at the end of the project that amounted to about $150,000 per month. And some of these construction lenders were willing to, deal with forbearances and such. So we also, on the public lender side, I think, the county and others who are willing to pitch in so that we can get to perm conversion. Speaking of perm conversion, we have 30 perm conversions between now and the end of the year. CHPC last year did a very great workshop around perm loan conversions and what needs to be done, seeing the writing on the wall in terms of all the cost to cost of funds, construction loan interest. So to that end, we are helping to make sure that folks are focused on lease ups, focused on ACHP clearance, making sure those inspections are done, really heading off any type of prevailing wage challenges. The department itself is in charge of that, and also helping to accelerate any other internal processes within the department. So I feel like we are actively just trying to kind of get this all wrapped up so we can start beginning to focus on the future. We have accelerated our draw processing in terms of how we pay folks. We cut that in half compared to June of 2023. So I'm happy to report that. And in addition, there are a couple other things happening within the department that we just want to share that we're noticing. We're seeing the withdrawals, the requests tied to your operating and replacement reserves for your projects. We've seen that increase by 25%. We saw a backlog. We know that namely that's due to insurance increases, and we've accelerated our approvals really quickly so that you can have access to that. We also have implemented a series of underwriting updates, one requiring all of our developers to update the REO schedule so that we can take a look at the real estate the properties and their financial health a little bit more systematically. We're also doing some other things around sponsor underwriting. Okay, now on to kind of the reason why we're all here. I know everyone's interested in where are we with the affordable housing managed pipeline and the NOFA. As a reminder, that is a combination of our home funds that we get from HUD, our SB2 funding from the state, and linkage fee. So I have to say, you know, our home allocation was a little bit was used for many things, but we also we have our SB2 dollars, and the real estate recording fees have really seen a reduction statewide. Obvious reason is interest rates have doubled, you know, nearly in 18 months. We also have seen linkage fee collections kind of drop. So with all of that, we're going to have to patiently wait until we replenish before we move forward with a NOFA. During this time, we're happy because our guidelines get rolled out at the same time of our NOFA. We're happy to hear your thoughts. We certainly need to do a lot to bring alignment to what other public lenders are doing. There are updates to developer fee, which I know a lot of developers are super happy about. We know that the service caps are being lifted. And so we're thankful HCD has taken that on. So we have to do some further alignment. I know folks are going to ask me about United to House LA. We thank the voters of Los Angeles passing this measure and proposition. Our expenditure plan, as well as our guidelines, are being taken through council. So we're hoping to seek approval, receive approval. That will allow for us the ability to prepare NOFAs. But during this time, we don't plan on seeing any money in the system until all the lawsuits are resolved. And what that looks like for the upcoming year is that specifically tied to the developers in the room, $8 million will be provided to the multifamily affordable housing allotment or allocation, and $64 million is earmarked for the alternative models for permanent affordable housing. We have to give a lot of credit to the ULA Citizens Oversight Committee, as well as the city family, in helping us get to this point. So that concludes my update, and I'm happy to help answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Well, this is the time for you all in the audience to ask any questions that we haven't already covered. We have a few that I'll start working through, but feel free to use the Q&A function again, and we will get to those. But Matt, I'm going to start with you. One of the viewers asked if the RAD for PRAC is for new or existing projects.
So RAD for PRAC is for existing projects. If you have an existing project that has a PRAC contract and you want to recapitalize that through the RAD program, that is the portfolio that's eligible.
So ones who already have a PRAC contract in place. Great.
That's correct.
Zach, I'm going to move over to you. We've got a couple of comments or questions in the Q&A about sort of emerging developers. And I know that that's something that HCD has worked with in your multifamily housing program. I think you have a set aside for emerging developers. Is that something that you can talk to?
Yeah, we have set asides in our Supernova for both emerging developers and community-based developers. It's been a priority of ours and the administration. I understand we have to be pretty creative in how we deal in that space, so that's why those are those categories. And you know, we were able to meet those set asides in all the previous rounds. So we certainly are happy to try to provide as much technical assistance as we can up to a point. Another piece we're working on, we don't have it yet, but hopefully would be in place by the time of the next Supernova, is just a more robust we're going to seek contracted assistance for technical assistance within the emerging developers, community-based developers, and really like tribal space. So thinking about entities that have not been able to access state funds. And we're going to do that like writ large. Not in the past, it's kind of out of necessity and the funds available been done kind of program by program. But we're going to try to go out with a contract that allows us to kind of help reach those emerging and community-based developers and tribes kind of for all of our programs, federal and state. Obviously, a big emphasis and a big chunk of the money that's helping to do that is from the Home Key Plus fund, but we're hopeful that it will also assist folks in the Super NOFA, as well as some of our tribal specific NOFAs, and then some of our federal programs too that tend to serve more rural areas. So we are definitely trying to grow our technical assistance there. We can't help you do an application ourselves. That wouldn't be right, but we are doing our best to try to build up technical assistance in those spaces.
And I know that many emerging developers often will partner with another experienced entity for their first project or first couple of projects and able to get those experience points and then be able to kind of go out on their own.
And we did make quite a few changes from round 1 to round 2 in that space to try to help facilitate that. And, we were pleased that we were able to meet those set asides within that second round. And so we're not proposing major changes there, but we want to kind of stay the course and trying to help those entities.
Great, thanks, Zach. I'm not aware of it, but Lynn or Daniel, is there anything that the county or city level that works with emerging developers? All right, we'll move on. Someone want to comment? No, go ahead. Okay.
Mark, that's me.
Yeah.
Our previous NOFA did give 5 points to those that are BIPOC. So I think that's one of our ways to kind of motivate that, but otherwise, no.
Got it. Okay. So this is a comment that I hear a lot these days, which is about operating subsidies. And I think we know that, projects that have a large percentage of permanent supportive housing and even others that serve extremely low income households often don't cover their operating costs. Those have been rising. Kind of the need for operating subsidies, particularly long-term ones, is sort of growing. Anything that any of you want to sort of touch on about how we can sort of ensure that there are long-term operating subsidies for developments that need them?
I'll start. Earlier this week, we did put out some guidance. It's going to be omnibus throughout our programs around support services caps. So please take a look. Obviously, it's technical, but it is retroactive, and that does help. One thing I will highlight, Home Key and Home Key Plus, we as a state provide a capitalized operating subsidy reserve. In the past, have asked for some matching funds for those to try to make sure that our partners at the local level have some skin in the game. And obviously, we don't have that NOFA out yet, but I think you can expect to continue to see some of that support. And we have actually had some internal conversations about potentially growing that support, given that the focus of Home Key Plus is permanent supportive housing, which not to say we weren't doing any of that in Home Key. Certainly, we're serving very similar populations, but we're very mindful of the supports there. There's also, of course, everyone, and the questions we get all the time in this space is, what is the new Behavioral Health Services Act funding going to look like? That is a little bit tough, right? We're coming out with our funding before the counties actually have that funding starting in 2026. So we're certainly going to try to provide some incentives for localities to think about that as a commitment and how we can count it as a committed source. But also there's a range of state programs that can be tapped into. And so we, of course, look to see some local match there, but we're looking to expand maybe what we might provide. That's kind of a signal from past rounds, but of course, the state alone can't fund just all that, and we're trying to combine both the capital and operating funds. But we are very mindful of that. That's why you'll see a continued commitment.
I know the community is very excited to hear that about Home Key. My understanding is that the Supernova may make some funding available for capitalized operating subsidy reserves for special needs units. Is that correct?
I mean, we've done that in the past. Obviously public comment period. So, and obviously the support services cap that we put out already will apply, and you'll see that in the draft guidelines, but it's uniform to our programs. So please take a look at that, and if there's any comments, we hear them. But it's a tough balance to try to strike, for sure.
Yeah, I think this is for just the city of LA. I mean, we've created the nation's biggest expansion of PSH, and obviously that's thanks to a three-legged stool. It's tied to the capital funding, the operating subsidies, rental subsidies specifically, and then also the service dollars. And if I look at kind of what I just shared, news of very limited monies, it's going to be really hard for us to be able to take advantage of or be able to provide further funding to Project Home Key Plus. But more so, our housing authority has been providing project-based vouchers. They've met their cap, and it's going to be really difficult to offer anything in terms of matching for the city of LA. So that's something that I just wanted to raise. I think the ideas of capitalized operating reserves we learned from MHSA. that most of those dollars are, if you take a look at those accounts, the capitalized operating reserves didn't function the way it was supposed to, meaning they were drawn down a lot sooner than we had all expected. And I'm certain that with inflation and insurance costs, that probably did take a hit to those specific co-stores. So it's gonna be hopefully, the city can look underneath the couch and secure more funding, but it's going to be really difficult to bring this to fruition.
And Lynn, you mentioned that NOFA 31 would have some project-based vouchers available. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, we have a set aside. We had projected providing project-based vouchers for future NOFAs, and we may be getting close to that cap also with this NOFA, and maybe one more. We do have vouchers set aside for some of these RFPs that we'll be issuing. So that's a commitment that, we've got to maintain. But currently we do still have some available for the next NOFA.
And Lynn, I've got two quick questions for you. One, in the next NOFA, will the county continue to prioritize projects that have at least 50% PSH?
Likely. Yeah, that is currently our position. Of course, as we solicit input from the board offices, sometimes that changes, but currently prioritizing homelessness and special needs population is on our agenda.
And then can you confirm how much in affordable housing trust funds will be made available in the upcoming NOFA?
Likely approximately $70 million, maybe a little bit more. So we'll have our affordable housing trust fund allocation from the Board of Supervisors, and we have some home funds that need to be issued. So a little over 70 million.
All right, Daniel, got a couple for you now. One was, please repeat the details of the $8 million ULA for perm housing.
Okay, it's for ULA, it's expected that there's $7.7 million roughly available for what's called the multifamily affordable housing allocation, and specifically for the alternative models for permanent supportive housing. That's 64.
And were there other details on sort of what you're looking for under those programs, or?
I'm sorry, the guidelines are still being approved, so I think it's a little premature, but once we get through that and get those approvals, I think we can start sharing.
All right, so keep your eyes and ears open. All right, and then when is the LAHD managed pipeline expected to open up next?
Because of limited dollars, as well as a number of projects that we've had to help support to get them to perm conversion. It's really, it's something that we're monitoring. It's going to be probably summer of next year.
All right. And then you already repeated the dollar numbers for ULA, and then you did mention that you're not planning on making any of the money available until the lawsuits are resolved, correct?
That's correct.
Got it. Okay. Zach, back to you. It looks like there will be no further funding for CalHome after this current NOFA release, or is that correct? Or are you expecting another home ownership supernova in 2025?
All of the money that we have is accounted for on our NOFA calendar.
Got it.
So
there is
we're releasing a homeownership supernova likely next month, and that is about for 160 million or so, and most of that is CalHome. But it accounts for all of our existing funds. I mean, stipulating there could be some disencumbrances or other types of things, but in terms of what we put everything out on that calendar that we have.
So here's a question for City of LA. What's the best way to look out for community development block grant opportunities for projects in the City of LA? Are there upcoming opportunities folks should be aware of?
We can take this offline and you can email me personally. The CDBG work is done by our community investment and families department. So we can send you that way. So feel free to email me.
All right, and then for Lynn, what is the estimated size of your next capital NOFA, and will there be an equal distribution of awards by district?
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned that we'll have probably a little more than $70 million in our NOFA, comprised of the Affordable Housing Trust Funds and home funds. And typically, yes, we do try to distribute the funds equitably among the 5 districts. Sometimes, it's not possible because of the applications, but we do make that effort.
And then will the PBVs in your NOFA be used for PSH units or general ELI units?
Typically, they're used for PSH units.
All right. Going back to you, Zach, is Project Home Key Plus funds only for 100% PSA projects, or is it, will they you can have lesser percentage and it's prorated across the units?
First, no project in the name. I know the media love to say that. It's just Home Key. It was Project Room Key.
Oh, that's correct. Yes. Home Key Plus.
Okay, no, just a bit of levity there. Yeah, the funds we have is just for permanent supportive housing. So could you come in with a project that was less of that? Sure, right? Obviously, what we're going to look at, and even getting back to the other earlier questions, is the viability and sustainability of that project, right? Those that have the most committed funds and are the most ready to break ground. I mean, a component of the Home Key and how Home Key Plus program is the speed by which it can operate. So certainly, would we think about a project that was less than that? I think so. The other thing that we have asked questions about in our program overview is gap financing to existing projects. So there are a number of projects that already theoretically meet public policy goals funded through HCD that may be well aligned to tap into this funding and we could fill that gap and replace tax credits and bonds. And so that's not to say we could do that for every project. There will be limitations on what we are willing to do, but we are very open to that possibility on a shovel-ready project. That might be like, for example, a No Place Like Home project or a veterans housing home restoration project, right? Those are very well aligned potentially. So we want to think creatively to help some of those things across the finish line. So one of the tenets I think of Home Key is please come with your ideas and we will do our best to try to fit them in. We require a pre-application consultation for that reason. And so don't be shy about asking once our NOFA is out. We do those before we make the applications available so that we can help folks along those paths.
And Lynn, back to you one more time. What are the per project maximum funding amounts for future LACDA NOFAs, both in incorporated, unincorporated LA County and cities in LA County that aren't the city of LA and in the city of LA, all 3? Do they differ?
That one I could say no comment. No,
Okay.
we don't have that information decided yet.
Okay. And then Marina, not to leave you unscathed here, but you mentioned that there potentially will be 3 CIDLAC 4% rounds in 2025. You mentioned that the first would probably be early in the year. Do you have any sense of timing for the other 2 CIDLAC rounds?
No,
Okay, but to be decided in December.
evenly spaced.
Sorry, say that again?
I said evenly spaced. We'll see.
Fair enough. Okay, and then interspersed with 9% rounds presumably as well to some extent.
Yes.
So, okay. Well, we are at time essentially. So I know I didn't get to every single question, but I think most of you know our distinguished panelists, and if your questions didn't get answered, feel free to contact them. If not, contact me, and I will try my best to get you an answer. But I just want to give a big thank you and a round of applause here, virtual and otherwise, to our guests. I think this is a really valuable service to the members of SCAMP who are desperately trying to get more affordable housing built and look to partner with you all. So I just want to really thank each and every one of you for taking the time, being available to the community, and being such good sports about taking you back to high school. So with that, I think we'll sign off and until next year virtually, but hopefully we will see most of you tomorrow in Pasadena. So I'll be on that early morning flight. I'll look for some of my Sacramento colleagues here, and I will definitely see the rest of you in Pasadena. And to our audience, hopefully we see you there as well. So thank you, everybody, for your time and for your attendance.